Hello, welcome back to From Soft Serve. Today is going to be just a short little video about something I was tweaking with yesterday that is actually kind of cool, and it's something I did before, but I did it in a really shitty way, and so now I found a better way of doing it, which is the specular maps or the specular map textures on these map pieces and objects in DSR. They basically went seemingly mostly unused in terms of their surface detail. And so in New Londo, you'll see on the walls here, I've changed them to be very wet or moist. And you can do this through the specular map. And this is an area where I always thought okay, yeah, this is a very wet area. Not all the areas in the game, are going to work with that. But this, I could actually go through each texture and then manually adjust the specular map to just basically the fog and inside this cave. I just knew it was dank, right? That's just the feeling I got. So I basically went through and so you'll see this really nice, not to mention it also increases surface detail over what was done before, as it's mostly down to at least my current modifications with it is generally you're looking at a texture here, which is M10 floor block S. And by default, the specular maps for Dark Souls Remastered are generally all red. They're just red with the detail. And so in paint.net, one of the things you can do is do a recolor, and you can actually I was messing around with different colors to see how the engine would respond. My initial specular map changes months ago were by changing them to purple. And that would crank up the reflective properties, but it would crank it up too much. And so I ended up coming to a sort of color like this, that I found when you changed the specular map to this color, then it would go, oh, okay, you would like wetness. And you save that, you repack it. And really it's kind of just playing around with that. Of course, you can do these kind of things in the material settings, the MTD, which is how everything has different shaders applied to them. I wanted to do it on a per texture basis, as if whenever you start editing the MTD files, those are obviously applied to a lot of other objects that you might not be aware of. And so it was sort of something where I was yeah, I don't know that I necessarily want to edit those, because those are very broad-based changes. So for me, this was kind of the more laborious way, which is going texture by texture, and then applying that effect so that you get this nice moist feeling, which is what I always figured New Londo would be like, because, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious with the fog that's sort of, enveloping it, right? And for some reason the pot I can't get to be terribly oh, okay, it is a little bit. It's just the way that it handles it is different. And, even now, the wood, I fucked up the wood before when I was doing this, but now it actually has a pretty nice moist look to it. I'm going to say moist 500 times, and people are going to cringe every time in this video. So I fully recognize that. I hate moist. I hate that word. But yeah, so it was just a tiny little change that, look at the surface detail on this wall here. Oh my God, I gotta take a screenshot. That's so good. A lot of that surface detail went unused in this game. By default, they had upgraded the physically based materials system for DSR coming from Prepare to Die Edition, because it went from DX9 to DX11, and obviously there's a ton of extra material support that comes with that, and so they did do some work on that, and there's only been a handful of textures that I've seen, and I think I might still have one up. Maybe. We got normal map, we got light map. So the other thing I've been looking into is sort of the way, yeah, okay. So this is one of the textures in Undead Berg. You'll see it's M10 floor block metalness underscore S for specular, DDS. And then inside the fiber file for this, it actually denotes it as in the folder of M10 and then textures and then PBL, which stands for physically based lighting, right? And it's really weird. I haven't figured out how the game engine is deciding what is PBL and what is not, because I've tried changing it in the fiber file, and let me tell you, it doesn't like it. So I'm still toying around with that, because if I unlock that, I think I can really get a ton of extra detail that was not present in the game beforehand. But they mostly just didn't use it. But like, I think it's pretty spectacular results. So I do look to do that in other areas in the game that would benefit from a moist look, at least as an initial thing, until I figure out, like, the other thing I need to figure out is roughness. So actually, this is a good example in here. This wall texture here, if you'll notice, it's not a moist look, but it is a specular, physically based way that it's handling the light from the bonfire. And when you actually look at the texture for this wall, it is specifically saying, it's a metalness specular. They add that underscore metalness, and then it's in a PBL folder, which doesn't exist. That's the weirder thing to me, is that the file structure that it's referencing in the fiber file doesn't exist, but it must be a way of telling the engine to use the PBL nature that mostly goes unused. So that's something I'm toying around with, because I do want to figure that out. I'm probably going to post on server name Discord, because there's people smarter than me. Because once again, I'm not a texture artist. I am actually pretty stupid when it comes to textures, I think. It's always been something that, like, I can upscale them, but the actual, like, understanding of the PBL pipeline and, which channels handle roughness, which channels that gets into a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't know about. I'm probably going to just message Trivia about that. So if she's watching this, you'll probably have a DM, because you know all about this, and I'm very curious about that. Yeah, I'll DM her. She'll know. The other thing is, let's go to Anor Londo, because this was actually another instance of, in my mind, because I posted on Twitter about this, there were people that were like, yeah, in my mind, Anor Londo did have more reflective properties to it, but I just never noticed that it didn't. So I went through a little bit of Anor Londo, and by default, there already was like a specular material response on this inside portion, but I sort of added it to the exterior portion as well. And so now you can have the light actually go all the way across the floor more naturally. And because I always figured that Anor Londo was an ornate sort of smooth marble style of place. That was always my assumption with it. And the material response didn't really match up to that. So that's where I've gone through and adjusted the specular maps. It's early on, obviously, but I've been trying to adjust them to where there is a more marble style. So you'll see the material response here as well. And the good thing is that it is subtle enough to where you don't notice it at normal camera angles. It is an addition, but it is not something that I think is going to be distracting. Like, you can kind of notice it from this angle, just a tad on the edges. There's just a little bit of sheen there. And then as you pan the camera down, you can actually see now there's all this really awesome surface detail that was completely lost, and the sun is hitting it. And so you're getting this really cool material response that was just 100% absent. And so as you're running, you can kind of see this little sheen, just this nice little touch, for me at least. And I just think it adds quite a bit. And then as you walk in, you can see it keeps stretching into where the sun is hitting. But what I like is that when you walk over into the shade, it actually darkens. It's still shiny, but it is much darker, as it would naturally be with the sun hitting the marble floor here. And so that's sort of my thinking is I'm interpreting what the textures were meant to be conveying. And I do know that's obviously a fraught game, you know, that I think that's obviously not, you know, going to be perfect. I think there will be changes that I make that people don't like. And you know, I understand that. So you can see now on this, there's a material response on the actual like ring around the floating elevator, and obviously on this as well. And then I added it to the actual texture for the elevator because this always, like, I think when you look at this texture, it is obviously marble. Like, just looking at it, you know, I'm not like an interior designer or anything, but to me it was very clearly marble. And now you're getting this really cool marble sort of response. And on the stairs as well, because I always figured they were, once again, ornate. And that's just something that was always communicated to me. But I think my mind sort of just like applied it. And I also think with these specular changes, you can actually notice the pattern on the floor. It's like this really strange pattern. I always thought it was just like squares, but it's actually like this really fucking cool pattern. And this extends to, I was kind of messing with the ground over here. So you can see as you're walking, there's that subtle added detail or surface detail. But from normal camera angles, as when you're normally walking, you won't notice it. And that is obviously intentional. It's not meant to be in your face all the time, but it is there if you want it. I just always figured that Anor Londo had that kind of look to it. And it's even on like the little marble, whatever the hell you would call that, I don't know, stone statue thingy. I'm still, the cobble over here, I'm still messing with. I'm not happy with how it looks. But like, it's kind of weird. They handle things completely differently in terms of like the X and Y coordinates, it seems, of this texture versus this texture, where you'll see the response here, and when you walk over, it stops. But it continues when you look this way. But then it continues too much, and it ends up being the whole texture. So I am looking into how to make the specular on this look better. A lot of this is actually reminiscent of Bloodborne, where Bloodborne has a lot of that sort of specular response to it on a lot of its textures. And Bloodborne did actually go to a physically based rendering system. That was their first time upgrading to that for PS4, you know? And so I think maybe they went a little overboard on it, but I loved it. I thought it was really cool. But yeah, let me know what you think of the sort of added material qualities that the game was lacking by default, you know? But what I like is that when you run normally and with normal camera angles, it will not be noticeable. It's not going to be shoved in your face. It's something where if someone is really taking in the environment, they can go, ooh, that looks kind of nice. All right. And then you can go, ooh, all right. I like that little sheen to it. It's just, it's supposed to be subtle and just add a little bit of, I don't know, just add a bit of quality to it. And because I always figured that they had some sort of material response, but it just mostly went unused. So that's something that I would like to change. I'm going to see if there's this buttress, see if we can do a change live for it, because I think showing the process is always worthwhile. I think I may have already done it. Let's see. Top down. I don't know. Yeah, this buttress here. Let's see. So basically my process is pretty imperfect, but let's open up our DS Map Studio and I will show you with no cuts. So some of this might be boring, and I don't blame you if you click off the video, to be honest. I think most of my channel is like that, to be honest. So basically you hover in DS Map Studio and you find the map piece that you're looking at, which is this big 2200. we're going to go into Model Editor. And then you basically go to 1501, which is Anor Londo, 2200, and we now have our map piece, which, let's see here, we have, and then basically you click on the one that you want to actually find the material for. And so on this little surface here, it is material index 16. So I usually always have a folder open. We go into our Dark Souls Remastered map, 1501, which is where our Fiverr files are stored. We are looking for 2200. And you can see here, I've already unpacked it. I have the .back, which is a backup. I have the DCX, which is the file the game engine actually uses. And then I have a DCX back file as well. And they all have different dates, more or less, of times. So the oldest one is actually the DCX back. That is basically the default file, which is always good to have. You kind of always want to have a backup file, just in case you need to use it for something. But basically, we open it up, we go to Material, and we remember that it's Material Index 16, and that'll tell us the texture. And it is the M15 Chapel Buttress Roof. Now, you'll notice in the path here, it'll say TGA, and if you look in the actual texture files, none of them are actually TGA. That's just sort of one thing they don't tell you, but basically the game engine automatically converts them to TGA. So that's why you'll see TGA here. So don't be alarmed if you see that. That's it. The conversion process is kind of crazy, how far they go to basically, let's go to M15. So basically the game engine is jumping into the TPF BHD or BDT file in this case, because that's where all the textures are actually stored. It's basically jumping into that BDT file, and then inside the BDT file, it is jumping into a DCX file, which it's then unpacking into the TPF, which it's then unpacking into the DDS, which it's then converting to TGA. And so all of those levels of compression, and it's kind of crazy. So I always think that's just an interesting way that they're doing it. Let's see if we can find the Chapel Buttress roof, because I've already done a lot of these. We have, oh yeah, Chapel Buttress Roof. Look at that. Yeah, Chapel Buttress Roof S. And let's look if that's roof. Oh, Buttress Roof. Yeah, okay. Roof S. Yeah, okay. So it is currently set as red, which is your default, right? And so if you open this, and I already have my color loaded with the color changing. Obviously, if you have like Photoshop or GIMP, I'm sure there's comparable things. Photoshop obviously is like 5,000 times more powerful than anything else. But just for funsies, I like to, let's up the tolerance so then the whole thing is blue. Yeah, so I like to, let's do that. Save it as BC1, texture compression, DDS, and we will then open up that file or go back to that folder, which you'll now see it's updated to be blue. You then right click on it, because this is my unpacked folder. You yabber it, so that is put it back into the DCX file. But unfortunately for DSR, you're not done yet. You basically have to now repack the folder that it was in, which I think was 0, right? Yes. And so basically they have these 4 TPF files, and that's what the game engine pulls from. And it's kind of annoying because Prepare to Die Edition doesn't have any of this. Like, they just have a big folder with textures, and you can just fuck with them. But here you have to like repack, unpack, repack, unpack. And the other thing is that DS Map Studio, because we're actually looking at the exact file and the exact material, it will basically not allow that yabber to work. So I close that, and then you obviously have to close your game running as well. And so I'll take a screenshot, and this is how it looked prior, which does have a material response. But I think it was missing a bit of shine to it, personally. And so basically now we yabber our overall TPF file. There you go. And we should now be able to load it with the new specular map for that specific texture. And now you can see maybe a bit too much Yeah, maybe a bit too much, but it's fun. It did actually add, this is just a good example, is it now has added that material response to this texture. So that's sort of something that I'm going to be playing around with, as I do want to tone down the gloss factor to different levels to make it less noticeable in different cases, because it's a case-by-case basis, for me at least. And so I don't want to do something that changes it like 100% for everywhere in the map, because I think that's not appropriate for, you know, every part of the map. So that's kind of why I'm taking the more laborious approach to it. Hey, I thought I killed your bitch ass. Well, okay. Ooh, that's a nice little... You want to give me that shield? No, I mean, you gave me your knives. That's, you know, I'll take it. I should be able to mess with the large chest ahead statue and make it a little bit more reflective. And like this floor, I think, is already more reflective now. So it's stuff like that. I've repeated myself 5 bajillion times in this episode, so hopefully that's not too annoying. But if you enjoyed this episode, I also said this was going to be a short one, and then I ended up talking a lot. So I'm sure no one is surprised by that. But if you enjoyed this episode, I do have a Patreon. I have a link in the description. You get ad-free episodes every day of when I post them, but generally it's every day. And pictures of my cats. I currently have the Prepare to Remaster mod on there to download for the Prepare to Die edition, because it's not ready for Nexus. But I figured, like, okay, I can put it on Patreon. I'll get way less people downloading it, and I can get targeted feedback, because currently it's Firelink Shrine and Undead Berg right now. So it's not a lot, but I wanted to get some feedback on it, but not put it on Nexus, so this sort of made sense. And yeah, supporting me on there helps a lot. Other than that, I have a PayPal. Or you can just, well, not or, and, or both, or none. You can like the video, helps a lot. Sharing it, subscribe if you haven't already. The classic spiel. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.